Hi guys, this is S&DJR SNF88 speaking, and welcome to the 9th instalment on the Railway Room and Lyncombe Vale. So once again, welcome to this update. There's been plenty of exciting progress made to the layout since the previous video, which I can't wait to share with you guys. Of course, if you are watching this as a live premiere, feel free to get involved in the live chat on screen now. And if you are watching this after the video has premiered, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Your comments are very much appreciated, and I really do love reading and replying to your feedback and your thoughts and any other questions that you have about the progress made to the layout and the modelling projects that you see in this video. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the progress that's been made to Lyncombe Vale. So since filming the previous update, I've made another research trip to the real location, where I mainly focused on the Coombdown Tunnel section. While I was there, I took along my representation of the tunnel mouth itself and compared it to the real structure, and as you can see from this shot here, it really is starting to take shape. With the fun photo shoot over and done with, I then set about snapping various areas of the tunnel mouth which I hadn't previously photographed, so mainly the retaining wall along the top of the tunnel mouth itself. From these images, I've been able to incorporate a number of changes into the model. So we've added a number of brick patches into the parapets on either side, which I'd missed from previous photos that I'd used, and also building up the retaining wall itself, which was quite straightforward. There was the majority of it was brickwork. However, there was this strange concrete block in the bottom corner here above one of the parapets, which I've managed to incorporate as well. With all the stone and brickwork complete, I then added the base colours. So we've added a pale stone colour to all the stonework, replacing the rather sort of plasticky, rubbery grey colour that was the main sort of part of the original tunnel mouth I used. That's all now been covered up, waiting for washes and various powders to bring out the stone effect. And I've also added the base colour for the brickwork, which is an engineer brick blue. On top of this, I'll then dry brush in the red brick colour in various levels. So a couple of bricks will be picked out in a much deeper red so they stand out. And then of course that will all be finished off with the grey wash to tone it all down, much like all the other structures on the line. So with work on the tunnel mouth well underway, I turned my attention to the nearby plate layers hut and ballast bin. The ballast bin is still there to this day, and I was able to get some rough measurements from this, which I then sent on to Sam's Trains, who kindly printed off this custom 3D print. This has since been weathered and detailed and is now really looking the part, and I can't wait to place this on the layout. The plate layers hut is scratch built from plasticard, working from a number of historical images, as sadly there is no evidence of the building left today. This has been detailed with various parts from other kits such as the door and chimney breast, and the roof has been created from an aluminium takeaway tray. I pop a little link at the top of the screen now to a video where I actually did a tutorial on how I created these corrugated iron strips, so hopefully that will be of help. A full build of this plate layers hut also features in the October 2021 issue of Railway Modeller, along with a couple of diagrams that I've drawn up, as well as a couple of historical images that I actually worked from, so hopefully that'll be of interest. So before leaving Lyncombe Vale, I took a walk through both of the tunnels, and while I was in there I took samples of soot from the tunnel walls. Now I mentioned this in a previous update where I suggested that I could use some of the actual soot from the tunnel mouths themselves to act as weathering powders on the models. So I've got two sample pots here, one containing the soot from Devonshire Tunnel and one containing the soot from Combe Down Tunnel, and these have since been dried out and hopefully will be blended into a weathering powder which will then be used on the appropriate tunnel mouths when ready. I'm really looking forward to trying this out, and it just adds that extra little bit of sort of a connection to the real site. Naturally, I couldn't leave the depths of Coombdown Tunnel without playing one of my real sound recordings. So I waited for a number of walkers and cyclists to pass by in order not to startle them. I then set up a loudspeaker and played my sound recording of a 7F and Bullied Pacific double heading, and here is the end result. So with all the structures nearing completion, it meant I could finally get round to creating the landforms for the Coombdown Tunnel section. And as you can see behind me, the scene is really starting to come together. Like the rest of the layout, this has been assembled from Celotex, the same stuff that you use to insulate your loft. Now, it's a very messy material to cut, but it is very easy to shape and manipulate and create these beautiful flowing hills and valleys, which I've managed to do here. This took many, many hours of shaping, but I think I've managed to get the rough shape of this area quite well. Of course, it's very hard to see from historical photos and of course visits, purely because of the number of trees in the area, which is something I hope to replicate when the scenery is on there. Now, this area was a bit of a challenge to get the track through here, mainly because of the radius of the curve and the viaduct. Because this has to join back onto the workbench, I was constrained by a curve, so the curve is slightly sharper like the rest of the layout compared to the real scene, but there is a very noticeable curve there in real life, or was I should say. But I was constrained by the viaduct. The viaduct is very narrow and it meant I had to get the curve on top of the deck there without large coaches clouting the edges of the walls and fences when they're eventually put on there. However, I think after much testing and much planning, I managed to figure this out, and the curve is a nice sweeping curve through this scene, and it's not far off the real one, and it doesn't mean that any of the rolling stock will hopefully strike the edges of the bridge. So once I got the positioning for the bridge, I then shaped the valleys around this, and then allowing in for the positioning of the plate layers hut, the ballast bin, and of course Coombdown Tunnel itself. Now the track leads off into the Fiddle Yard through the tunnel, but at the other end it goes out onto the lift out section, which you can see in position here. Now the track is of course only temporarily rested on here, but it just gives you an idea on what I'm going to have to do. Basically this curve is going to be a bit sharper on this lift out section, but again you will not see this. This will be completely be bare as it is here. It won't have any scenery on it. It's just a simple lift out section to allow trains to continue from the Devonshire Tunnel section under Moger's Farm Bridge, which is right on the edge of the board there, and then onto the Coombdown Tunnel section bit, which then leads onto the workbench. So the idea behind this is just going to simply just plonk in there and allow the trains to simply pass over, but also as a mounting point for me to position the camera to allow for shots like this one here, which is quite an iconic Ivo Peters shot of trains coming out of Coombdown Tunnel heading towards Bath. Now above Coombdown Tunnel, as mentioned in the previous update, there is quite an iconic shot that I wish to try and replicate. So for this I'm going to have that pull-out section that I briefly mentioned. So I'm going to create a little bit of a back scene which will be attached to a little plate with some trees on it. Hopefully that'll be able to slide out, maybe on like a little guide rail or something. Then I'll be able to position my camera in there. But then when I'm doing the other shot from the other end showing trains coming out, that will be slid back in so you don't get to see the workbench behind it, creating the optical illusion that it's really dense woodland, much like the real scene. I'm still yet, of course, to add the main back scenes which will be going along the walls there. I'm going to have to do something similar to what I did for the Devonshire Tunnel section, where it's going to be actually a right-angled back scene where the two scenes sort of touch together, which is not ideal, but it's the only way I'm going to be able to get it on here because the confinements of that corner will not allow me to put a curve back scene in there. And I think a curved back scene won't add too much to that area anyway, considering that I hope to populate this area densely with seafoam trees, which I recently tried out on the area, and it really does start to bring this whole scene to life. So once those back scenes are in place, it finally means I get round to doing the mud rock and other bits and pieces, and basically just finish off shaping these contours here, and then hopefully we can make a start on the scenery. tunnel's now in position, it meant I could finally get round to planning the Fiddle Yard on the workbench. So behind me here is Devonshire Tunnel, and within there you can see there is a pair of points which splits the single track running line into a double track passing loop. This goes around a radius-free curve, or roughly radius-free curve I should say, onto the scale model scenery baseboard, which will be a lift-out section. And as mentioned in the previous update, this could be changed for micro layouts or various other little layout projects that I can build. As long as the track is in the same position, it will clip in there, and it means I have a lot of extra possibilities rather than this just being a basic fiddle yard. Then we come on to the Coombdown Tunnel section, and of course there will be a shelf positioned above this. Again, I briefly mentioned this in the previous update. But you can see it then goes back onto another curved set of points before obviously going out through the tunnel there as well, meaning that the room will have a complete loop. Now, there is a bit of a challenge to this. The track I'm going to be using inside the Fiddle Yard is going to be code 100 set track, or, well, for the quarter sections at least anyway. There's two reasons behind this. One, it's much easier just to keep the curve there because it's obviously pre-formed curved track. And two, it's the radius of the points. If I used code 75 points, the radius would have been much larger, which meant I wouldn't have been able to get them in there, and it would have to been single track all the way through. So I've had to sort of be a bit conservative on what I used here, but it does mean that I'm able to get the passing loop actually in there. Now, this does pose a challenge, meaning that it's going to be a challenge to connect the code 75 of the bullhead track on the scenery section to the code 100. However, there is a solution at the Coombdown Tunnel section end. There is a special adapter track which Pico produced where it actually automatically adapts code 75 rail into code 100 rail, which is really ideal for this area as it's already on a curve, which means there's enough space to put this little tiny straight piece in and basically allow a seamless join between the two rails. However, in the Devonshire Tunnel section, this is on a continuous curve, which means there's no space for one of these little straight pieces. So I'm going to have to solder the two rail types together, which is going to be a bit of a challenge, but it should be very much achievable. So I'm going to have a few little practice goes with a couple of spare pieces of track before I try the main thing, and hopefully it will all work out. But all being well, it means that there will be this continuous loop and we'll have trains running soon. The length of the passing loop, of course, is not ideal for a Pines Express, of course. It's probably about the size for a local train, so i.e. a loco, like a tender loco and 3 coaches, but that is enough for me. The whole point of building this layout was I knew that I'd be really constrained with a fiddle yard, and it was one of those things is, do you want a fully functional fiddle yard which you could store a full Pines Express train, or do you want more of a scenic area? And of course it was a no-brainer, and I'm sure you will agree. And of course it gives me the possibility for those micro layouts there anyway. And being a workbench, as you can see, there's plenty of room to arrange stock for when I swap over locomotives and of course wagons and coaches for various running sessions. But it's not been all progress on the layout. I've got round to working on the S&DJR goods wagon rake, which you saw in the previous update. The goods rake now stands at 7 wagons, although technically it classifies as 8 if you include the interchangeable body on the Sam's Trains chassis, and is really starting to look the part. First up, we have the Midland 20-ton brake van, which has now received its S&DJR markings along with its running number, number 24. Now in the previous update I mentioned I was torn between what markings I should actually have on this van, whether to have just S&D or the full S&DJR markings. In the end I opted for the latter, purely because I felt the plain sides of the van really did need something on there, and the S&DJR markings really do fit in there quite nicely. There are of course no historical images that I've found to date of this particular van, however I'm hoping that I might come across one day, so I've been working from previous models that other people have created, and I really think this livery does suit this particular van. Other things I've done to this is including weathering the roof and weathering the running gear lightly, and it really does I think suit the vehicle particularly well. Next up, we have the dapple com flat, or I should say one of the dapple com flats. This has had its transfers added and the fictitious running number of 132. As mentioned, a number of these vehicles are just sort of rough representations based on, loosely based on prototypes that would have ran on the line. Much like these two open wagons. So we have S&DJR 522 and we have S&DJR 356. Again, these are loosely based on open wagons which would have ran on the line, but they just look right in a goods rake. So whilst on the subject of open wagons, we come on to the Sam's Trains open wagon. Now, as you saw in the previous update, I completed his mini road van, and this is the second body that came with that kit to fit to this particular chassis. And it really does look the part. I've painted all the latches and various other brackets on the body itself, along with adding the S&DJR markings and the running number. Now, ironically, this vehicle looks very similar to a departmental wagon that the S&DJR had, so I've given it the same running number, and it just looks really nice alongside the other open wagons in the goods train. It adds a bit more variety to the train, purely because it's such a low height compared to the rest of the wagons. But Sam wasn't done there. As mentioned earlier on in this video, he kindly sent me the custom 3D print of the ballast bin. Well, in the box, along with that, was another wagon kit, and it was actually his Type B chassis with the larger body. And he had sent this sort of LSWR inspired box van. Now, as soon as I saw this kit, when I got it out of the box, I actually was working on the com flats at the time, and I thought, I wonder if the body will fit to a dapple chassis. And sure enough, the body actually does. So I've actually fitted the 3D printed van body to the chassis, which was going to be used for the second com flat to add a bit more variety to this goods train. And here is the end result. It is just staggering. It looks the part. Now, the S&DJR did actually have a number of these LSWR vans, and there's actually one preserved, or I should say an LSWR van which has been painted in the livery it would have carried on the S&D, actually preserved at Midsummer Norton Station. It's actually the sort of the static one that's in the car park. So I based quite a lot of the details on that van from that particular vehicle. As you can see, I've highlighted the various sort of brackets and metalwork on the actual wooden body itself, as well, of course, adding the transfers and all the markings, along with the grab rail on the sliding door, and it really does bring the kit to life. Which brings us on to the final wagon in the rake, the LSWR road van from Curnow. So as you saw in the previous video, this started off life as a BR Islander White variant with grey sole bar, which was ideal for converting into the S&DJR livery. So I've gone and added the S&DJR transfers and the running number 73. Now these are slightly embossed text compared to the other ones, as noted by the similar style van that I based this particular road van on. And it really has come up quite a treat. And again, I've had quite a lot of questions as to where I sourced this particular vehicle. So if you are after one of these particular models, do go and check out the Curnow Model Railway Centre website. They got a good variety of liveries, and in fact the Somerset Dorset Trust does own one of these vehicles in the LSWR livery, which is another vehicle I'm potentially looking at getting at some point in the not too distant future. So while I was editing this update, a bit of breaking news came in, and that is a new TV series is about to air on UKTV called Hornby, A Modelling World. And basically it's a new documentary following the Hornby team behind the scenes, showing them develop a number of products, which includes locomotives and rolling stock under the Hornby brand, as well as Airfix and Scalextrics. It really is an exciting programme. And as part of that programme, they also are following a number of societies, groups, model railway clubs and modellers. And as you know, a couple of updates ago, I mentioned I had to refilm or redo a section of Lyncombe Vale because it was being filmed on camera. Well, that is the reason why. Basically, Lyncombe Vale is going to feature in this TV series, or the early stage of it, as of course, the layout is still not complete. But the production crew turned up and they filmed me doing a bit of modelling, as well as talking to me about my interests in the hobby and why it's such an amazing pastime to be involved in. And yeah, it really is an exciting programme. There's lots of familiar faces involved, so be sure to check it out. It starts on October the 11th at 9 PM on the Yesterday channel. I'll pop all the details in the description below, which includes all the channels you can see it on. But behind me here, you can see we've got a little wagon here. And this wagon came in as a promotional piece for a publication in Railway Modeller magazine, and I know a number of other magazines have also received this. It's a custom wagon that's been produced by Hornby to sort of promote the TV series, and as you can see here, hopefully if I've got it held right in front of the camera, you should be able to see it's got all the sort of the name of the show and of course the channel brand logo on there. So just a little quirky item, but you never know, this might actually become a product. I don't know, but it's from what I've been told, it's a very extremely limited wagon, but it's just a quirky little promotional piece. But yeah, be sure to check it out. So October the 11th, 9 PM on Yesterday TV. So once again, I guess that's all for this update, and I hope you have enjoyed the progress that has been made to the layout over the past few weeks and months. It really is starting to come together now, and as with model railways, it is a slow progress, especially when you're working around work and other things, but it is slowly getting there, and my sort of vision is starting to take shape. I guess the next thing to do is use mud rock and other materials, sort of like plaster and stuff like that, to start finishing off the terraforming for these hills before, of course, we get on to the fun part, well, the fun part for me, which is, of course, starting to add the scenery and basically bring the whole scene to life. As well as, of course, laying the track, which is, of course, a very important feature, as you all know, for building a model railway, which, of course, I've yet to do. But that is all to come, hopefully in the not too distant future. So, until next time, this has been S&DJR 88 speaking, and thanks for watching.